All right, greetings, everybody. I'm Larry Williams, the Director of CARMA, the Consortium for the Advancement of Research Methods and Analysis at the Rawls College of Business, Texas Tech University. It is October 24th, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to another CARMA Quick Chat. As you may know, our Quick Chats are where we take the opportunity to engage and learn a little bit about the people who contribute to CARMA. And today I'm very excited to be chatting again and officially welcoming back to CARMA Allison Gabriel. Allison is the Thomas Howell Chair in Management at the Mitchell Daniel School of Business in Purdue University. And the reason we're chatting with her is in a few weeks on November the 15th. That's a Friday. She's going to be giving a webcast lecture on methodological trends in the study of emotional regulation and emotions at work. If you're not familiar with our webcast, with Carmen, our webcast program, this is a 1 hour lecture that's made available to members of our various groups, including our institutional members, as well as our Academy of Management affiliate members. And then the recording goes into our video library. We offer these lectures, panel sessions, and short courses with an institutional membership model. And you can find more about CARMA at our website, karmattu.com. So, and we're excited because Allison has given a webcast lecture before, and it's always extra special to welcome people back. So, Allison, it's great to see you. Very happy that things are working out so well for you at Purdue, and appreciate you taking the time not only to fit the webcast into your schedule, but also this quick chat. So basically, when did you realize you wanted to be a professor and why? Will be a starting point for us.
Yeah, I was trying to think if some of these questions were the same as the last time we chatted, but I think this one's new. Um, so I knew pretty much when I started college that I wanted to be a professor. I thought I was going to end up being a law school professor, though. So there's a little bit of backstory. My grandfather, he was a professor of sociology for many, many years. He passed away when I was really little, around 6 years old, but I grew up hearing lots of stories about Dr. Gabriel and the professor and, the presence he had. He was a professor at Fordham. And I just always was really intrigued by that. I loved the idea of teaching. And for whatever reason, I got it in my head that I'd be maybe good at a lawyer. And so I applied to Penn State. I picked psychology as a major kind of on a whim, thinking that that would help me in the courtroom. I could learn how to read people, I suppose. And I ended up taking a seminar my very first year there, first semester, like week 1, called Psychology of Service with a Smile with Alicia Grandy. And very fortuitous and fitting the talk I'm going to have in a couple of weeks. The whole course was about customer service and emotional labor and just the complexities of how do we manage our own emotions and the emotions of other people around us. And she pulled me out of the class and pulled me into her research lab and asked what I wanted to do. And I said I thought I was going to go to law school. And she was like, no, I think you should go into IO psychology. I think you'd be pretty good at this. And I kind of humored her for a little bit. I was like, okay, sure. Applied to graduate school thinking I wouldn't get in. And next thing I know, I have an offer to University of Akron to go work with Jim Diefendorf, also studying emotional labor and emotional regulation. So I always knew I wanted to be a professor for a really long time, but the target was off, I'll say. I thought it was going to be law school. And, I'm really lucky that Alicia caught me when she did and helped me pivot to organizational psychology. And then, that led to the position I have now.
Yeah. So, well, I guess I asked the question of, do you describe yourself as a within-person researcher? And if yes, how and why did that transition occur? Was there like a specific event that led you to see the world in this different way?
That's a great question. I don't know if there was a specific event. It was more so that the data that resulted and the method just made sense to me. So very early in my training at the University of Akron, Jim was my doctoral advisor. He introduced me to the idea of daily diary data. It was with samples of nurses. And this was, back when you were collecting paper, literal diary booklets of data, no Qualtrics, no anything. Um, and the diaries were just, I actually still have one. I just showed my doctoral students this like 2 weeks ago in my seminar. I have a couple of them as artifacts. It just was so fascinating to me to see how people's ratings of their emotions were changing day to day, and their interactions, and the narrative stories they would actually write in the diaries about the things that were happening to them. And it just made sense to me that so much of what we care about is how people experience people and interactions and the work that they do, and that those experiences are going to change pretty dramatically, not just day to day, but even within the same day, right? So I primarily identify myself as a within person methodologist. That's the way my brain thinks. If anything, I have to work really, really hard when we don't take that method to convince myself that it's okay that we're not using that method, because it just makes sense. And especially now being a parent of a little kiddo who's 4.5, I feel like you see especially like how volatile emotions are day to day, and you're like, yeah, this is not the same every day. So why are we measuring things that are really important to us in organizational behavior and psychology and HR, assuming they're static, when we have a lot of evidence now that they're not?
Well, you've done a lot of important work in this area, and many of our viewers might know that in 2019, you published an article in Organizational Research Methods on ESM. It has become increasingly popular. What do you think has led to its popularity? And in the time since then, what are some trends that you have seen in terms of the best practices that people are using?
Yeah, I hard to say. I think a couple things are playing into the popularity. I think one is an increased recognition that a lot of our theories, our classic theories, really are within person theories. And I get into this debate sometimes with people, and I'm like, no, we're very rarely talking about how some trait predicts another trait behavior, right? We're talking about more dynamic processes. And so good, multi-level theory building, theory testing, all the things requires your method to match the level of analysis being espoused in the theory. And so I think it has been an increased awareness on that front. I also think what's likely contributing to that is the ease with which this data can now be collected. So there was a huge period of time, like I said, where the cost to do this was quite profound, whether it was, literal paper diaries, or if it wasn't diaries for a long time, it was Palm Pilots, where you
Mhm.
had to, program the Purdue momentary assessment tool that came out of a number of folks here at Purdue. And the program was great, but had startup costs, right? And Palm Pilots are expensive. Now you can very easily, maneuver through Qualtrics to pre-program surveys, or Louis Tay also here at Purdue has XFOL, and there's other platforms that have made it more efficient for people to do the method. Um, and the third reason is I hope people just think it's interesting. Like I just think we have such a cool opportunity to really understand the lived experiences that employees are going through. And I think the best way to do that is to understand what their life looks like each day. Um, so I hope those are the three big reasons, and that this increase is happening. I would say best practices side. Um, I think there was a period of time where people inadvertently did not realize that the same limitations of basic survey research apply to ESM. So, it's not a place for cross-sectional surveys on a daily basis, right? You don't want to be testing mediation-based processes or serial processes with one survey a day for 10 working days. You now have a 10-day repeated cross-sectional data set. So I think we're getting better at temporal separation in our constructs. I think people are getting really creative in how they're bringing in other sources of data, whether that's physiological data from actigraphs or Fitbits, or trying to think about other reports that could be interesting. Um, so, in some of our own work we've done, we've had employee spouse partners, bringing their spouses or partners at home to come in if we're interested in work family issues. We've worked with coworker data before as either antecedents or outcomes. So I think people are starting to push the bounds of what's a typical ESM study in a really good way. And then I would say the other trend I'm starting to see is the incorporation of experience sampling studies with other methods, like experimental methods, to maybe test part of a model you're going to put into the full experience sampling study to try to unpack or, better glean, a process that might still be missed within ESM. A lot of experience sampling studies, we're taking our best shot at when we think surveys should be happening during the day. We're hoping we get it right, but sometimes you could still miss some really cool variation. And so thinking about how to combine some with other methods to better get at some of those processes is really impactful.
Well, those are all some very good reasons, and I guess that's why it has become such a popular method that has enabled the kind of theoretical understanding that your work exemplifies. So consider a student who's come into your program and they've gotten the bug, so to speak, and they're going to do their first study. Are there some kind of like standard tips that you would give people who are doing their first ESM study based on your experiences? Some things to do or some things not to do?
Yeah, absolutely. Number one, take your time. I think, I understand that students or early career faculty have a lot of time pressure, right? Time pressure to get publications in graduate school to get a job, time pressure to then get tenure. But designing experience sampling studies really can't be rushed because, again, there's all these temporal considerations. So you have to think about the constructs you're interested in and really do some reading or some pilot work. We use a lot of qualitative interviews lately, actually, in our experience sampling work as well, leading up to it to try to understand, how frequently is our phenomenon of interest occurring? What time during the day should these surveys be going off? How long should the window be? What is the temporal referent of the instructions and the items, right? And really making sure that all of these things match up so you don't end up with a data set where maybe you didn't think this through and now all of a sudden your mediator has a temporal referent that's mismatched from your outcome and you can't guarantee that your outcome happened after the mediator or vice versa, right? So I think that's a big mistake people make. I unfortunately see that quite a bit in my role as an associate editor at Journal of Applied Psychology. When I get ESM papers, if there's a common fatal flaw, so to speak, and I really dislike that term because no study is perfect, but I think that's probably the biggest one. Is just a lack of careful thought about the temporal sequencing of when surveys are going off, when the measures are in the survey, if that makes sense, how you're even lagging survey data from one day to the next and so forth. Related to that, I think, another thing people need to be mindful of is really carefully adapting items to the within person level. So again, a mistake I'll see is sometimes people don't do that. And then the items don't really make sense in an ESM context, or they're maybe focusing on constructs that have such a low base rate that we have to ask questions about why the within person study was needed to begin with. So, some of our most deviant counterproductive work behavior items, I hope you don't have people stealing in your ESM study on a daily basis, right? So really thinking about what is it you're interested in and what are the measures that are going to actually fluctuate day to day. That's something you should be working with, and that might require CFA or factor analytic work before the study even launches to pull the highest loading items from a scale, or figure out just by reading and interpreting which items are actually going to fluctuate day to day. And then the last piece, and this sounds really obvious, but I think I will say, your prior question was, what do you think some of the increase in interest in ESM is? I do worry that part of it is people are like, oh, this method is cool, and I bet reviewers like it, so I'll just use that. right?
Mm.
And I think students especially run that risk where sometimes they'll come to me and say, I really want to do an ESM study. And I always ask them, well, why? Like what is it that's necessitating this method to make sure that we're actually using it well? Because a well-designed experience sampling study is really expensive, right? You're talking anywhere from like the lowest I've seen in our own lab is like $6,000. We've had data packages go all the way up to 20, 22,000. Like there's a lot of privilege in getting to run these studies that I fully recognize. That's a whole topic for another day. But they are costly in all the ways. So actually making sure that the method is justified in a way that makes reviewers or readers see, like, of course, you had to use an ESM study here versus, getting the dreaded, like, why this method? It looks like you just picked a fancy method. Why did
Yeah.
you? Right. So I would say those are kind of the three pause points, as I'll call them, that I think folks wanting to get into ESM really need to think about, both from the design and then the why behind why they're doing that study in the first place.
Well, those are great words of caution that I hope will be of value to people who happen to view this chat that we're having. So I mentioned at the beginning, we're here because of your webcast, November the 15th. Can you give us a preview of what you're going to be talking about?
Yeah, so I was trying to remember when I gave my prior webcast, what year that was. I think it was around like 2018 or so. Predated kiddos, I think that's right. I also remember being horribly sick during the webcast. So hopefully it will not repeat on that front. But in that talk, it was around the time we were finishing up our organizational research methods paper, I believe, and it was a big overview of just ESM methods broadly. And I view this as a fun, more a narrower part two, where it'll be getting into some methodological issues around the study of emotions and emotion regulation work. This will be from a book chapter that I've been working on with some of my fabulous collaborators here at Purdue, where we'll be talking about just what do we mean by studying emotion regulation? What are the different ways you can study this? What does that mean theoretically, conceptually? And then what are the methodological trends we're seeing? And we really see three that I think are fascinating. One, not surprising to our conversation, is there's a big dynamic component and within person work. We also see dyadic research coming out, and then more person-centered or conjoint approaches to the study of emotion regulation. And so the talk is going to go through kind of where we are on each of those three buckets of research. And then something I really like about this chapter is that we come up with lots of ideas of how you could expand research in each of those three domains. So it's going to be a mixture of here's where we've been, and then see lots of ideas for where people could go if they're interested in studying this topic further.
Well, we will very much look forward to that. Again, that's November 15th. Allison Gabriel on emotional regulation, Karma webcast lecture. You can visit our website to get more information about her presentation as well as all the things we do. Allie, it's great to see you again. Appreciate you taking the time this afternoon to chat, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me.
Yep, thank you.